Day stood at the observation window of the transport shuttle, watching the massive station grow larger against the darkness of space. The Galactic Assembly Station was bigger than anything he had ever seen. It looked like a giant wheel made of silver and glass, spinning slowly in the void. Lights flickered across its surface like stars. He was nervous. Of course he was nervous. He was the first human to represent Earth at the assembly, not as a full member, just as an observer, someone to watch and learn. But still, it was important. The shuttle docked with a soft hiss. Day picked up his small bag. Inside was his data pad, some clothes, and a carefully wrapped package. The package held gifts from Earth. He had chosen them himself. Small things that showed what humans valued: art, music, stories. The airlock opened, and Day stepped into the station. The corridor was wide and tall, built for species much larger than humans. The air smelled strange. Not bad, just different, like metal and something he could not name. A woman waited for him near the entrance. She was human, which made Day feel relieved. She had short black hair and wore a simple gray uniform. "Day?" she asked, smiling. "I'm Hannah. I've been working here for 2 years. I'll help you get settled." They shook hands. Her grip was firm and friendly. "Thank you," Day said. "I'm glad to see another human face." Hannah laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "You'll be seeing plenty of non-human faces soon enough. Come on. I'll show you to your quarters." As they walked through the station, Day saw his first aliens. A tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms passed by without looking at him. Another being, covered in what looked like crystal plates, floated past using some kind of device. Day tried not to stare. "How many species are here?" he asked. 12 main council species," Hannah said. "But there are hundreds of other species working here. Traders, workers, researchers. You'll get used to it." She led him to a small room in the outer ring of the station. It was clean, but basic. A bed, a desk, a small bathroom. Through the window, he could see stars. "It's not much," Hannah said. "Observer quarters are pretty simple." "It's perfect," Day replied. He meant it. He had not expected luxury. Hannah sat on the edge of the desk. Her smile faded. "Day, I need to tell you something. Not everyone here is happy about humans joining the assembly. Even as observers." "I know," Day said quietly. "We're new. We're different. Some species don't trust us." "It's more than that," Hannah continued. "Some of them think we're beneath them. They think humans are too primitive, too violent. They look at our history and see only war." Day nodded. He had studied this. Earth's history was full of conflict. Wars between nations, between religions, between ideas. Humans had almost destroyed themselves many times. He could not argue with that. "But we're here now," he said. "We have a chance to show them who we really are." Hannah looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled again, this time more genuine. "I like your attitude. But be careful. Some of the delegates will test you. They'll try to make you angry. Try to make you look bad." "I'll be careful," Day promised. The next day, Day attended the opening ceremony of the assembly session. Hannah had given him a translator device that would let him understand all the different languages. It was an older model, she had explained. The newer ones worked better, but those were reserved for full delegates. The assembly hall was enormous. It was shaped like an amphitheater, with seats rising in circles around a central platform. Day found his assigned seat and sat down. Then he realized where they had placed him. He was in the very back row, far from the center. His view was partially blocked by a support pillar. Around him sat other observers from newer species. They all looked uncomfortable in the cheap seats. The full delegates sat in the front rows. They had comfortable chairs and clear views. Some had assistants standing nearby. Their translator devices were sleek and modern. Day did not complain. He took out his data pad and prepared to take notes. The ceremony began. Different delegates stood and spoke about peace and cooperation. The words sounded nice. But Day noticed something. When a delegate from the Vraxian species stood to speak, his tone changed. "We welcome all species to this assembly," the Vraxian said. He was tall and reptilian, with scales that shimmered green and gold. His name was Velthor. "Even the newest and most primitive among us. We hope they will learn from our example and perhaps one day prove themselves worthy of true membership." The translator made his words sound polite, but Day heard the edge in them, the subtle mockery. Another observer leaned toward Day. This being had insect-like features and spoke in a clicking language that the translator converted to words. "Did that offend you?" the observer asked. "He basically called your species primitive." Day thought for a moment. Then he replied, "Understanding comes before judgment. I'm here to learn." The observer seemed surprised by this answer, but Day meant it. Getting angry would not help. He needed to watch, to learn, to understand how this place worked. As the ceremony continued, Day noticed one delegate watching him. She was different from the others. Her body was insect-like, with multiple limbs and large, multifaceted eyes, but there was something kind in the way she looked at him, something curious. Later, Hana told him her name was Ithara. She was a counselor from the Quillian Collective, one of the oldest and most respected species in the assembly. "She's important," Hana said. "Very wise. If she's interested in you, that's a good thing." That night, Day sat in his small room and wrote in his journal. He wrote about what he had seen, what he had felt. He wrote about the disrespect, the subtle insults, but he also wrote about Ithara's curious gaze, about the beauty of the station, about the opportunity ahead. He was one person representing billions. He could not afford to fail. But more than that, he did not want to fail. He believed that humans had something to offer the galaxy, not military strength or technological superiority, just the simple ability to endure, to learn, to grow. Day looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home, a small blue planet full of flawed, struggling, hopeful people. He would make them proud. The next morning would bring new challenges. But tonight, Day allowed himself to feel hope. The galaxy was vast and strange and sometimes cruel, but it was also full of possibilities, and Day was ready to face whatever came next. 3 weeks had passed since Day arrived at the station. 3 weeks of careful observation and patient waiting. He had submitted a formal request to access the Assembly's historical archives. Every observer was supposed to have access to these records. They contained thousands of years of galactic history, treaties, and cultural information. But Day's request kept getting delayed. "System error," the automated message said the first time. "Under review," it said the second time. "Processing," it said every time after that. Day watched as other observers received immediate access. A delegate from a species that had joined just 5 years ago walked into the archives on his first day. But Day, representing humanity, was still waiting. Finally, after 3 weeks, his access was approved. Day entered the archives with quiet excitement. This was what he loved: history, stories, understanding how different species thought and lived. He sat at a terminal and began searching. But something was wrong. The records he could access were incomplete. Whole sections were marked as restricted or unavailable. When he tried to read about important treaties, he only got short summaries. Other observers could read the full texts, but not him. Day said nothing. He took notes on what he could access and kept working. He decided to try something different. Maybe he could build connections through culture instead of politics. Day organized a small presentation about human culture. He spent days preparing. He gathered images of Earth's art, recordings of music from different continents, and poetry translated into common galactic language. The day of the presentation arrived. Day had reserved a small meeting room. He had sent invitations to all the delegates and observers. He hoped at least some would come. Only 3 beings showed up. One was Ithara, the Quillian counselor who had watched him during the opening ceremony. The other two were junior assistants from minor delegations. They looked bored before Day even started speaking. Day felt disappointed, but he did not show it. He began his presentation with a smile. He showed them images of the pyramids in Egypt, the temples in Korea, the art of Renaissance Europe. He played music, Mozart, traditional Korean panzeri, African drums, jazz from New Orleans. Ithara listened carefully. Her large eyes seemed to take in everything. She asked questions about the meaning behind certain artworks, about how humans used music in their societies. But 15 minutes into the presentation, the door opened. Velthor, the Vraxian delegate who had mocked humanity at the opening ceremony, entered. He looked around the nearly empty room and made a loud clicking sound with his throat. It was clearly a laugh. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. One of the junior assistants followed him. The other stayed, but spent the rest of the presentation looking at his own data device. Day continued. He spoke about human poetry, about how art had helped humans survive their darkest times. Ithara seemed genuinely interested, but Day could feel the weight of the empty chairs around him. When it ended, Ithara approached him. "Thank you," she said. Her voice came through the translator as soft and musical. "Your species has created beauty in the midst of chaos. That is rare. Thank you for coming," Day replied. "It means a lot." After she left, Day stood alone in the empty room. He had hoped to reach more people, but hope was not the same as expectation. He cleaned up his materials and went back to his quarters. 2 days later, there was a formal diplomatic reception. All delegates and observers were invited. It was a chance to socialize, to make connections outside of official meetings. Day wore his best clothes. A traditional Korean durumagi, dark blue with subtle embroidery. Hana had told him it looked good. The reception hall was magnificent. High ceilings, elegant decorations, tables full of food from a dozen different worlds. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved through the crowd, talking and laughing. Day took a deep breath and entered. He tried to approach different groups, to introduce himself. Most were polite, but cold. They would nod, exchange a few words, then turn away to talk to someone more important. Day saw Tormak across the room. The Crothian ambassador was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick fur like a bear. Tormak controlled several important voting blocks in the council. Getting his support would be valuable for any species. Day walked over. He waited politely for a pause in Tormak's conversation with other delegates. "Ambassador Tormak," Day said, bowing slightly. "I'm Day, the human observer. It's an honor to meet you." Tormak looked down at him. His eyes were dark and cold. He stared at Day for a long moment. Then, deliberately, he turned his back. "I do not waste words on species who have not proven their worth to the galaxy," Tormak said loudly. Several nearby delegates heard. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others smiled. Day stood there for a moment, feeling the sting of the rejection. Then, he nodded, even though Tormak could not see him, and walked away. Hana found him later, standing alone near a window. "I saw what happened," she said angrily. "You should file a formal complaint. That was completely inappropriate." "It won't help," Day said quietly. "It would just make things worse." "So you'll just accept it? Let them treat you like garbage?" Day looked at her. "I'm not accepting it. I'm choosing not to fight it the way they expect. Getting angry, filing complaints, making demands. That's what they want. It confirms what they think about humans, that we're aggressive and can't control our emotions." Hana sighed. "Maybe, but it still isn't fair." "No," Day agreed. "It isn't fair. But fairness and wisdom are not always the same thing." Over the next week, Day heard rumors. Several delegates had complained about the human quarters. They said there was a bad smell coming from that section of the station. Environmental control was called to investigate. The technicians found nothing wrong. The air quality was perfect. But the complaints continued. Day realized what was happening. This was not about smell. It was harassment. Plain and simple. They were making up problems to make him feel unwelcome. Instead of complaining, Day did something unexpected. He researched each delegate who had complained. He learned about their homeworlds, their cultures, their preferences. Then he used what little money he had to buy small gifts. For the Vraxian who complained, he bought a plant from Earth that thrived in hot, dry climates. For the aquatic being who complained, he bought a recording of Earth's ocean sounds. For each one, he wrote a personal note expressing hope for better understanding between their species and humanity. He delivered the gifts himself, bowing politely when the delegates accepted them with confused expressions. Hana thought he was crazy. Why are you being nice to people who are actively trying to make you miserable? Because, Day said, they expect me to fight back with anger. They expect me to match their cruelty with cruelty. But what if I respond with something they don't expect? What if I show them that humans can be different? Some delegates mocked his gifts. Velthor actually laughed when he received his plant. But others seemed genuinely confused. A few even thanked him. That night, Day sat in his room and thought about his grandfather. His grandfather had survived war, had seen terrible things, had every reason to be bitter and angry. But instead, he had taught Day about patience and kindness. Anger is easy, his grandfather used to say. Anyone can be angry. Real strength is staying kind when the world gives you every reason not to be. Day looked at his reflection in the window. Behind it, the stars shone steady and bright. Somewhere out there, Earth continued to spin. People lived their lives, unaware of the small dramas playing out in this distant station. He would not let them down. He would show the galaxy that humanity was more than its bloody history, that humans could learn, could grow, could choose compassion over vengeance, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The emergency session was called suddenly. A territorial dispute between two council species had escalated, and immediate discussion was required. All delegates and observers were summoned to the main assembly hall. Day dressed carefully. He wore his formal durumagi, the traditional Korean robe he had brought specifically for important occasions. It was deep blue, with silver embroidery along the edges. His grandfather had worn something similar at important ceremonies back on Earth. He arrived early at the assembly hall. An usher, a thin crystalline being, guided him to his seat. But when they reached it, Day felt his heart sink. His seat was behind a large structural pillar. He could barely see the central platform where delegates would speak. He would have to lean sideways, just to watch the proceedings. Other observers nearby looked at him with sympathy. Even they recognized this as deliberate disrespect. The station had thousands of seats, many with perfect views, but Day had been assigned this one. He sat down without complaint. He positioned himself at an angle so he could see at least part of the platform. He took out his datapad and prepared to take notes. The session began. Delegates argued about borders and resources. The discussion was heated but controlled. Day listened carefully, trying to understand not just the words but the cultural contexts behind them. After 2 hours, the session went into recess. Delegates stood and moved into the adjacent reception area for refreshments. Day stood as well, stretching his back. Sitting at an angle for 2 hours had made his muscles sore. He walked to the reception area. Tables held drinks and food from various worlds. Day took a cup of water and stood near the wall, watching the delegates socialize. That was when Velthor approached. The Vraxian delegate was not alone. He had 3 other delegates with him, all from species that had shown hostility toward humanity. They formed a loose circle around Day, blocking him against the wall. "The human observer," Velthor said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "Enjoying the session? Can you see anything from your excellent seat?" His companions laughed. "The view is adequate," Day replied calmly. "Thank you for your concern." Velthor moved closer. He was holding a drink in one of his clawed hands. It was some kind of bioluminescent liquid that glowed blue-green. "You know, I admire your dedication," Velthor continued. "Coming here day after day, even though no one wants you. Even though everyone knows Your species is not ready for this assembly. We all have our duties, Day said. He kept his voice level and polite. Velthor stepped even closer. Then, as if by accident, he stumbled. His drink splashed across Day's Durumagi. The glowing liquid spread across the fabric, leaving bright stains. "Oh no," Velthor said, his voice mocking. "Forgive me. I forgot. Humans are so small. So easy to overlook." Day looked down at his stained robe. The Durumagi his grandfather had inspired. The symbol of respect he had worn to honor the assembly. Now it glowed with alien liquid like some kind of joke. He felt anger rising in his chest, hot and fierce. Part of him wanted to throw his own drink in Velthor's face. Part of him wanted to say something cutting, something cruel, but he breathed slowly. He remembered his grandfather's words. He remembered why he was here. "It's all right," Day said quietly. He set down his cup and pulled out a cloth from his pocket. He began dabbing at the stains. "Accidents happen." End quote. "Accidents," Velthor repeated. He was not done. He moved even closer, using his larger size to tower over Day. "Tell me, human, does your species understand honor? Do you know what it means to defend yourself? Or do you just accept every insult with a smile?" Other delegates were watching now. The reception area had gone quiet. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Would the human finally break? Day finished cleaning what he could. He folded the cloth carefully and put it back in his pocket. Then he looked up at Velthor. He looked directly into the Vraxian's reptilian eyes. "In my culture," Day said, his voice clear and steady, "we have a saying. A bent tree endures the storm while the rigid one breaks. You see my patience as weakness. I understand that. But I see something different." He paused, making sure Velthor was listening. "I see your need to prove your strength as fear. You're afraid of what my species represents. You're afraid that we might succeed despite our flaws. You're afraid that all your power and all your history might not matter as much as you think it does." Velthor's eyes widened. No one spoke to him like this. "I am not your enemy, Velthor," Day continued. "I'm simply someone trying to understand your world. But you've decided I'm a threat because that's easier than seeing me as a person." The silence in the room was complete. Day could hear his own heartbeat. Then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He bowed. Not a small nod, but a full, formal Korean bow, the kind that showed deep respect for another person, regardless of whether they deserved it. When he straightened, he spoke one more time. "I hope one day you'll understand that respect goes both ways. Until then, I wish you well." He walked away. His stained Durumagi glowed softly as he moved through the crowd. Delegates parted to let him pass. No one spoke. Day went back to his quarters. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the effort of controlling his anger. He had wanted so badly to fight back, to let Velthor know exactly what he thought of him. But that would have been easy. That would have confirmed every prejudice Velthor held about humanity. Day changed out of his stained Durumagi. He hung it carefully, wondering if the stains would come out. Then, he sat on his bed and put his face in his hands. A knock came at the door. It was Yuna, a young human woman who worked in the station's environmental control systems. She was a botanist, maintaining the gardens that helped produce oxygen for the station. Day had met her a few times in the common areas. "I saw what happened," she said. "The whole thing was recorded by security cameras. It's already spreading across the station network." "What?" Day looked up, confused. Yuna held up her datapad. On it, he could see the security footage. The encounter with Velthor. Every word, every gesture. His calm response. His bow. "I might have accidentally made sure this footage got distributed to everyone on the station," Yuna said with a small smile. "Technical glitch. You know how it is." Day did not know whether to laugh or worry. "Yuna, you could get in trouble." "Worth it," she said firmly. "People need to see this. They need to see how you handled yourself." After she left, Day checked his datapad. Messages were coming in. Some from humans on the station, expressing support. But surprisingly, some from aliens too. Junior staff members, mostly. People who had no power but who appreciated seeing someone stand up to bullying with dignity instead of violence. But there were also angry messages. Delegates who thought he had insulted Velthor by calling out his fear. Others who thought his bow was mockery. The assembly was divided. Some admired what Day had done. Others saw it as proof that humans were too weak, too passive, too different to ever truly belong. That night, Day could not sleep. He kept replaying the moment in his mind. Had he done the right thing? Should he have responded differently? He got up and looked out his window at the stars. Earth was too far away to see, but he knew which direction to look. "I'm trying, grandfather," he whispered to the darkness. "I'm trying to be the person you taught me to be." The stars did not answer, but they continued to shine, steady and unchanging. And somehow, that was enough. In the council chambers, Counselor Ithara sat alone, watching the security footage on her own screen. She had watched it 3 times already. Each time, she saw something new in the human's response: dignity, wisdom, self-control. She pulled up Earth's files and began to read more deeply. If this Day was representative of his species, then perhaps the Council needed to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. Perhaps they needed to reconsider many things. Counselor Ithara did not sleep that night. Her species required less rest than humans, which gave her time to work through the night cycle when the station was quiet. She sat in her private office, surrounded by screens displaying information about Earth and humanity. The official files that Earth had submitted when applying for observer status contained basic information: population numbers, technological capabilities, political structures, but Ithara wanted to know more. She accessed the detailed historical records that Earth had been required to provide. These were the files that most council members never bothered to read. They were long, complex, and often painful. She started at the beginning. Humans had evolved on a planet that seemed designed to kill them: predators, diseases, natural disasters, ice ages that should have wiped them out. But somehow, they had survived. Then came their own violence. Wars over territory, resources, religion, ideology. The records showed conflicts that had killed millions. Weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Humans had brought themselves to the edge of extinction more than once. Ithara read about World War I, World War II, the Cold War that almost turned hot, regional conflicts that scarred generations. But she also read what came after. After each war, humans rebuilt. They created organizations to prevent future conflicts. They wrote peace treaties. They formed alliances with former enemies. They tried, again and again, to be better than their worst impulses. She read about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, about the European Union rising from the ashes of centuries of warfare, about enemies becoming partners, slowly and imperfectly, but genuinely. Ithara pulled up records of human art and literature. She found stories of soldiers who refused to kill, of people who hid refugees during genocides, of individuals who chose kindness when cruelty was easier and safer. The pattern was clear. Yes, humans were violent, but they were also capable of remarkable compassion. They held both tendencies in constant tension, always struggling, always choosing. Most species had left their violent past behind before reaching the stars. They had achieved peace on their homeworlds, and then expanded into space. But humans were different. They had reached for space while still fighting themselves. They had built space stations while their planet still had active war zones. That was not weakness. That was extraordinary. Ithara made a decision. She sent a message requesting a private meeting with the senior council members. All 12 species had representatives on the council, but only 5 were considered the elder members, the ones who truly made decisions. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Ithara arrived early. The private council chamber was smaller than the main assembly hall. designed for serious discussions away from public attention. The other 4 elder counselors arrived one by one: Tormak, the massive Crothian who had insulted Day at the reception; Vexrian, Velthor's superior from the Vraxian delegation; Rendal, an ancient crystalline being who rarely spoke; and Korra, an aquatic species representative who served as mediator. "This is unusual, Ithara," Korra said. "What requires such urgency?" Ithara activated the central display. The security footage of Day and Velthor appeared. "I believe we need to discuss the human situation," Ithara said. Vexrian hissed softly. "My subordinate was provoked. The human did nothing wrong," Ithara interrupted. "Watch carefully." They watched. Velthor spilling the drink. His mocking words, Day's calm response. "The bow." "He showed restraint," Ithara said. "More than that. He showed wisdom. He identified the root of Velthor's hostility and addressed it directly, but without anger." Tormak growled. "He showed weakness. A true warrior would have defended his honor. Would he?" Ithara brought up more files. "Let me show you something else about humans and honor." She displayed records of human history. Not the wars, but the aftermath. The peace treaties. The reconciliation efforts. The countless small acts of courage and kindness. "Humans have a saying," Ithara continued. "They say it's easy to start a war but hard to build a peace. Most species learn this lesson and then avoid war forever. But humans learn it again and again because they keep making the same mistakes, yet they also keep trying to do better." She pulled up more recent records. The formation of the United Earth Government. The decision to seek contact with alien life. The careful, democratic process of choosing representatives. "They achieved space travel while their world was still divided," Ithara said. "They reached for the stars, not after achieving perfect peace, but while still struggling for it. That shows something remarkable about their character." Rendal, the crystalline being, finally spoke. His voice was ancient and slow, like rocks grinding together. "What do you propose, Ithara?" "I propose we test the human observer one more time," Ithara said. "But this time, we watch carefully. If he maintains his dignity under extreme provocation, we should reconsider our position on humanity. And if he fails," Vexrian asked, "then we delay their advancement, as planned," Ithara replied. "But I don't think he will fail." The council debated for hours. Tormak argued that humanity's violent history made them dangerous. Vexrian supported this view, though Ithara suspected his real concern was his subordinate's embarrassment. But Korra was intrigued. "Every species in this chamber has blood in their past," she said. "The Crothians had clan wars for centuries. The Vraxians conquered half their continent before unifying. My own people fought territorial battles that killed millions. We all have violence in our history. The question is not whether humans are violent. The question is whether they can grow beyond it." Rendal was silent for a long time. Then he spoke again. "I remember when each of your species joined this council. You were all tested. Some more harshly than others. The humans are being tested now. Let us see how they respond." Finally, they reached an agreement. They would allow one final provocation. Velthor would be permitted to escalate his harassment during the upcoming Grand Assembly, not to the point of physical harm, but close. If Day maintained his composure, the council would intervene on humanity's behalf. "And if we are wrong about him?" Tormak asked. "If he breaks, then we will know that humanity needs more time," Ithara said quietly. "But I don't believe we are wrong." After the meeting ended, Ithara returned to her office. She felt troubled. They were manipulating Day, testing him without his knowledge. It felt wrong, but the alternative was worse. If humanity was rejected from the assembly now, it might be decades before they got another chance. And Ithara had seen something in Day that reminded her of the best parts of every species: the ability to endure hardship with grace, the wisdom to choose understanding over anger. She pulled up the security footage one more time. Watched Day bow to his tormentor. watched him walk away with dignity despite the glowing stains on his formal clothes. "Don't fail us," she whispered to the image. "Don't fail yourself." Meanwhile, Day had no idea what was being planned. He continued his daily routine. He studied what limited archives he could access. He attended sessions when observers were permitted. He ate meals in the common cafeteria, often sitting with station workers rather than other observers. He had made friends among the staff. Jin, a human maintenance supervisor, who had been on the station for 3 years. Kryn, a Trilaxian mechanic who appreciated Day's curiosity about how the station's systems worked. Others from various species who were not important enough to play political games. These friendships gave Day hope. If he could connect with ordinary people from different species, maybe humanity had a future in the galaxy after all. The Grand Assembly was scheduled for the following week. It was the largest gathering of the session, when all major business was conducted. Every delegate would attend. Every observer would be present. Day prepared carefully. He had his durumagi cleaned. The glowing stains had mostly faded, though faint marks remained. He did not mind. They were a reminder of what he had endured and how he had responded. He did not know that the Grand Assembly would change everything. He did not know that the Council was watching. He did not know that the fate of Earth's future in the galaxy would be decided in the next few days. He only knew that he would face it the same way he had faced everything else. With patience. With dignity. With hope. The day of the Grand Assembly arrived with ceremony and spectacle. The main hall had been decorated with banners representing all 12 council species. Delegates wore their finest formal attire. The air hummed with conversation in dozens of languages. Day arrived early, wearing his durumagi. The faint stains from Velthor's drink were still visible if you looked closely. But Day wore the robe with pride. It had survived an insult, and so had he. The Grand Assembly was different from regular sessions. This was where major decisions were announced, where new policies were debated, where the future of the galaxy was shaped. Hundreds of beings filled the hall. From powerful delegates to junior staff members, allowed to observe from the upper galleries. Day found his assigned seat. He was surprised to find it was better than usual. Not in the front rows where full delegates sat, but in the middle section with a clear view of the central platform. Perhaps someone had noticed the unfairness of his previous seating. He did not know that Ithara had quietly arranged this. She wanted him to see clearly what was about to happen. The assembly began with formal proceedings. Reports were read. Minor issues were voted on. Day took notes, trying to understand the complex web of alliances and disagreements that shaped galactic politics. Then, 2 hours into the session, Velthor requested permission to speak. "High Council," Velthor said, standing at a delegate's podium. "I wish to address a matter of station protocol and observer conduct." Day felt his stomach tighten. This was about him. It had to be. "We have among us an observer from Earth," Velthor continued. "A species so new to the galaxy that their history barely registers in our records. Yet this observer has been conducting himself in ways that violate our cultural norms." The hall went quiet. Everyone turned to look at Day. "He has been spreading false friendship among station staff," Velthor said. "Manipulating workers to gain support. He has repeatedly inserted himself into situations where he is not welcome. He has brought shame to the observer program through his constant presence in places beyond his authority." Each accusation was carefully worded. Technically, Day had made friends with staff. He had eaten in common areas. He had attended public events. But the way Velthor described it made everything sound sinister. "I move that this observer be formally reprimanded," Velthor concluded. "And that Earth's application for advancement be delayed indefinitely, until they can demonstrate proper understanding of galactic culture." The hall erupted in whispers. Some delegates nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. The High Counselor, Rendal, spoke. "The observer may respond to these accusations." All eyes turned to Day. He stood slowly, his heart pounding. He had not expected this. Not here. Not now. Not like this. He walked to the observer's podium, a smaller platform to the side of the main floor. He looked out at hundreds of beings, all waiting to judge him. For a moment, his mind went blank. What could he say? How could he defend himself against accusations that twisted truth into something ugly? Then he remembered his grandfather. Remembered the stories the old man had told about surviving war and hardship. Remembered the lesson that had guided Day through every difficult moment on this station. I will not defend myself by listing facts, Day began, his voice quiet but clear. Instead, I want to tell you a story. He saw some delegates lean forward with interest. My grandfather survived a terrible war on Earth, Day continued. He saw friends die. He saw his city destroyed. He had every reason to become bitter and angry. But he didn't. When I asked him why, he told me something I've never forgotten. Day paused, gathering his thoughts. He said that respect is not demanded. It is demonstrated through how you treat people who cannot benefit you. He said that the measure of a person is not what they do when everyone is watching, but what they do when no one important is paying attention. He looked directly at Velthor. I have been on this station for months now. Yes, I made friends with staff members. I ate meals with mechanics and botanists and janitors. I learned their names and asked about their families, not to manipulate them, but because they are people, and people deserve respect regardless of their rank. His voice grew stronger. You say I bring shame to the Observer program. I say that any program that considers basic kindness to be shameful is not worthy of my respect. You say I violate your cultural norms. I say that if your norms require me to ignore the people who keep this station running, then your norms are wrong. Shocked silence filled the hall. No one spoke to the council like this. I represent Earth, Day continued. A planet with a terrible history. We have fought wars. We have committed atrocities. We have nearly destroyed ourselves. I will not deny any of that, but we have also created beauty. We have also chosen peace. We have also learned to work together, despite our differences. He spread his hands. I am one person. I am not a warrior or a politician. I am just a scholar trying to understand your galaxy. But if my species is judged unworthy because I showed kindness to people you consider beneath notice, then I accept that judgment, because I will not apologize for treating people with dignity. Before anyone could respond, something unexpected happened. In the public gallery, Jin stood up. The human maintenance supervisor who had become Day's friend. Then Kryn, the Trilaxian mechanic. Then others, workers from a dozen different species, all standing in silent support. The gesture rippled through the hall. These were not important people. They were maintenance crews and technicians and support staff. But there were dozens of them. And their message was clear. Velthor stared at them, his reptilian face showing shock. Then Counselor Ithara stood. I invoke council privilege, she said formally. When a counselor invoked this right, everyone had to listen. I wish to address this assembly. She moved to the main platform, her insectoid body moving with fluid grace. This council has spent months testing the human observer, Ithara said. We have watched him endure insults and disrespect. We have seen him respond to provocation with patience. And we have learned something important. She activated the central display. The security footage appeared. Velthor spilling the drink on Day. Day's calm response. His bow. We have been asking the wrong question, Ithara continued. We asked whether humans deserve to join us. But perhaps we should ask whether we deserve them. She gestured to the gallery where the workers still stood. This human came to learn about our galaxy. What did we teach him? We taught him that power matters more than character. That rank matters more than respect. That it is acceptable to abuse those who cannot fight back. She turned to face the other counselors. Yet, despite everything we subjected him to, he remained kind. He made friends with people we ignore. He showed grace when we showed him contempt. He reminded us of something we had forgotten. One by one, other council members began to stand. Not all of them. Velthor and his allies remained seated. Tormach looked conflicted, but did not move. But 8 of the 12 stood. A clear majority. High Counselor Rendal rose last. When he spoke, his ancient voice filled the hall. "I have served on this council for 300 years," Rendell said. "I have seen many species join and leave. I have seen the best and worst of galactic civilization, and I have learned that true civilization is not measured by technology or military might." He looked at Day. "It is measured by how we treat those who have nothing to offer us. This human came seeking nothing but understanding. We offered him contempt. He had no power, no leverage, no way to force us to respect him, yet he earned respect through his actions." Rendell turned to the full council. "I move that we issue a formal censure of Delegate Velthor for conduct unbecoming his position. Furthermore, I move that we grant Earth an accelerated path to full membership status, with full council support during their probationary period." The vote was called. 8 in favor, 3 against, 1 abstention. The motion passed. The hall erupted. Some delegates cheered. Others protested. The workers in the gallery embraced each other. Celebrating, Day stood at the observer's podium, stunned. He had expected rejection. He had been prepared to accept failure. But this? Ithara approached him. "You have given the galaxy a gift," she said quietly. "You reminded us why we formed this council in the first place. Not to maintain power, but to build understanding." Day did not know what to say. He simply bowed, the same formal bow he had given Velthor. Later, after the chaos had settled, Day stood in the station's garden atrium. It was a quiet place filled with plants from 100 worlds. He came here sometimes to think. Hana found him there. "You did it," she said, grinning. "You actually did it. Earth has a path to full membership." "I didn't do anything special," Day said. "I just tried to be kind." "That's exactly what made it special," Hana replied. In the following weeks, things changed. Some delegates who had ignored Day before now sought his opinion. Others remained hostile, but they were more careful about it. The station felt different, more welcoming. Day completed his term as observer. When it was time to leave, he stood in the garden one last time. He had brought a gift for the station. A cherry tree sapling from Earth. With Ithara's permission, they planted it in the garden. A small ceremony was held. Delegates and workers attended together. Afterward, a plaque was placed beneath the tree. It read in 12 languages, "From Earth, with hope. Planted by Observer Day, who taught us that the quietest voice can echo the longest." Day returned to Earth as a hero. But he did not feel like one. He had just done what his grandfather taught him. He had chosen kindness when cruelty was easier. He began training the next generation of human diplomats. His lessons were simple. "The galaxy is vast and strange," he told them. "You will meet beings who don't trust you. Some will test you. Some will try to make you angry. But remember this. You don't represent yourself. You represent all of humanity. And humanity, at its best, chooses understanding over anger, compassion over vengeance, hope over despair." 2 years later, Earth was granted full council membership, not because of military strength or economic power, but because one person had shown that humanity could contribute something valuable to the galaxy: the ability to endure with grace, the courage to be kind, the wisdom to see enemies as people who simply did not understand yet. And in the garden atrium of the Galactic Assembly Station, a cherry tree grew tall and strong. Every spring, it bloomed with beautiful flowers, and everyone who saw it remembered the quiet human who had changed the galaxy simply by refusing to let it change him.